Headlights tore through the fog on the narrow road leading to the Okafor estate at midnight on a Friday. Loveth, wearing faded jeans and an oversized sweater with her hair pulled into a messy bun, was locking the chicken coop when two sleek black sedans materialized from the mist like predators. Her pulse spiked. Her hand instinctively reached for the flashlight hanging from her belt, the heavy metal kind that could double as a weapon. No one drove out here at this hour. Not unless they were Mr. Kang's people. 3 years ago, her father had died of a heart attack, leaving her this crumbling countryside estate and a debt of $200,000. That debt had been sold to Mr. Kong, a loan shark infamous for burning down properties when patience ran thin. Loveth had learned to function on fear. It was her constant companion, waking and sleeping. But tonight felt different. The air held a charge she couldn't name. Before we dive deeper into this story, click the subscribe button and tell us where you are watching from in the comment section. If this story moves you, share it with someone who loves a good tale. Do not forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss another story. A car door opened with the whisper of expensive engineering. A man stepped out, tall and lean in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her annual income. Not one of Kang's thugs. This man radiated a different kind of danger, the kind that made even predators hesitate. Even through the fog, Loveth could see the exhaustion etched into his features. Black hair touched with gray at the temples, eyes the color of steel in winter, a face that had forgotten warmth existed. He walked toward her porch with measured, purposeful steps, his $2,000 shoes accumulating mud with each stride. Loveth raised the flashlight, aiming the beam directly at his face. "This is private property," she called out, her voice steadier than she felt. "Turn around and leave." He didn't even squint against the light. "Are you Loveth Okafor?" His voice carried the weight of command, more accustomed to obedience than negotiation. The accent was Korean, clipped and precise. "Who's asking?" Loveth kept the flashlight trained on him, though her other hand slipped into her pocket where she kept her phone. "My name is Sujin Park. I need to speak with you. It's urgent." He stopped at the bottom of the porch steps. "I'm not here for violence. I'm here with a business proposition." Loveth's grip tightened on the flashlight. Business propositions happen during business hours. This is trespassing. I don't have business hours. I have 24 hours until I lose everything. For the first time, something human flickered across his face. Desperation, maybe. Or the kind of fatigue that comes from fighting too long. 5 minutes of your time. That's all I'm asking. Against every survival instinct, Loveth lowered the flashlight slightly. 5 minutes. You stay on the porch. Your men stay in the cars. Sujin climbed the steps. Up close, she could see the faint scar running along his jawline, the shadows under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. This was a man at the end of something. "This estate has been in your family for 3 generations. It wasn't a question. You're 26 years old. You work double shifts at the Riverside Diner to pay interest on a debt that will take you 40 years to clear at your current rate. You have no living relatives. No support system. You're drowning, Miss Okafor, and you're too proud to ask for help." Loveth felt anger flash hot in her chest. "If you came here to insult me, I came here to offer you a solution." Sujin's voice cut through her building fury. "I need a wife. Legally married by tomorrow morning. The woman must have a spotless background, no criminal record, no scandals. In exchange, I will pay off your entire debt, plus enough money to restore this estate." The words hung in the fog-thick air. Loveth stared at him, waiting for the trap. "You're insane. I'm desperate. There's a difference." Sujin pulled a slim folder from his jacket. "I control a significant organization in Seoul. Tomorrow at 9 a.m., my board of directors votes on whether I remain in power. Half of them are traditionalists who believe an unmarried man lacks the stability to lead. If I don't present a wife by morning, I lose my position. Likely my life as well." Loveth didn't take the folder. "So marry someone in Seoul. Everyone in Seoul knows who I am. What I am. Any woman I marry there becomes a target, a pawn, a liability. I need someone outside my world. Someone with a clean past and a reason to keep the arrangement purely transactional. His gray eyes met hers. You need money. I need legitimacy. It's a fair trade. Fair. Loveth laughed bitterly. You want me to sign my life away to a stranger who shows up at midnight with armed men? Read the contract. Sujin set the folder on the porch railing. 1 year of legal marriage. You keep your name, your life, your freedom. After the board vote, you'll rarely see me. When the year expires, we divorce quietly. And you walk away with everything I promised. Loveth opened the folder to find a contract dense with legal terminology. The final page listed a sum that made her stomach drop. Enough to clear the debt 3 times over. Enough to finally breathe. Why me? She asked quietly. Because you're the only person on my list who pointed a flashlight at me instead of fainting or trying to seduce me. His mouth almost curved into a smile. Loveth looked at the numbers that could change everything. Then she looked at the man who'd brought them. If I agree, you don't get to just throw money at me and disappear. Sujin's eyebrows rose. I just explained. I heard what you explained. Here's my counteroffer. Loveth closed the folder. You want legitimacy. You want to prove to your board that you're stable. Then you move into this house. Into the spare room upstairs. And you work this land with me. Excuse me. You heard me. Loveth stepped closer. You live under my roof. You learn what real work is. Manual labor. Fixing fences. Feeding animals. Getting dirt under your expensive manicure. You want a wife for legitimacy. I want a partner for survival. Not your money. Your hands. Sujin stared at her like she'd suggested he sprout wings. I run a multi-billion-dollar organization. I don't have time to shovel manure. To repair roofs. Then you don't have time for my signature. Those are my terms. You live here, you work here, or the deal's off. For a long moment, silence stretched between them. Sujin's expression cycled through disbelief, calculation, and something that might have been grudging respect. 1 year, he finally said. 1 year. Loveth extended her hand. His grip was firm. You prove you can survive under my roof, and I'll play the perfect wife for your board. I'll have my people bring my things tomorrow after the ceremony. Ceremony. The marriage has to be legal and documented by 9 a.m. We'll need to go to the courthouse at dawn. He pulled out his phone. I'll arrange for the license to be expedited. We leave at 5:30. Welcome to my world, Miss Okafor. Everything happens on impossible timelines. Sujin descended the porch steps, then paused. You should know what you're agreeing to. By marrying me, you're painting a target on yourself. I've had a target on me since my father died, Loveth replied. At least this one comes with legal protection and a year's worth of free labor. The corner of Sujin's mouth twitched. Get some sleep, Miss Okafor. Tomorrow both our lives change. At 5:15 a.m., headlights returned. Loveth had managed exactly 90 minutes of sleep. She dressed in the only presentable outfit she owned, a simple navy dress she wore to church twice a year. The sedan door opened, and Sujin emerged looking impossibly composed. He wore a different suit, midnight blue, with a white shirt and no tie. Ready, he asked. As I'll ever be. The drive to the courthouse took 40 minutes through pre-dawn darkness. Neither spoke. The courthouse opened at 6 a.m. for emergency services. Sujin had clearly paid someone substantial money, because a clerk was waiting with paperwork already prepared. They signed documents, answered questions, produced identification. The whole procedure took less than 30 minutes, clinical and surreal. By the power vested in me by the state, I now pronounce you married, the clerk said in a monotone. Loveth looked at the marriage certificate in her hands, at her name next to Sujin's, and felt the weight of the choice settle over her. Outside, the sun was just beginning to break over the horizon. Sujin checked his watch. 7:15. I have a video conference with the board at 9. We need to get back. Our estate, Loveth corrected quietly. If we're doing this, we're doing it right. It's our home now. Sujin looked at her for a long moment. Our home. I haven't had one of those in a very long time. The board meeting happened in her father's old study. At precisely 9 a.m., Sujin's screen filled with the faces of 12 stern-looking people. He spoke in rapid Korean, his voice carrying absolute command. 20 minutes into the meeting, he switched to English. I'd like to introduce you to my wife. Loveth stepped into frame, acutely aware of how plain she looked. The board members stared at her with expressions ranging from surprise to suspicion. Mrs. Park and I were married this morning, Sujin continued smoothly. She comes from a respected family with deep roots in this community. Our marriage represents my commitment to building something stable and lasting. One of the older board members leaned forward. You married a stranger overnight to satisfy our requirements. This seems convenient, Mr. Park. Convenience and strategy are not mutually exclusive, Sujin replied coolly. My personal life is now in order. Shall we return to discussing quarterly projections? When the call finally ended, Sujin emerged looking exhausted. Loveth set a cup of coffee on the table. How did it go? They voted to retain me. 8-4. He sank into a chair. Thank you. We had a deal. Loveth sat across from him. Speaking of which, you have about 30 minutes before we start your first day of real work. Sujin's eyes widened. You're serious about the manual labor. Deadly serious. She grabbed worn work clothes from the mudroom. These were my father's. Change and meet me at the barn in 20 minutes. Exactly 20 minutes later, he appeared wearing her father's old jeans and flannel shirt, looking completely out of place. Where do we start? He asked quietly. Loveth handed him a bucket of feed. We start with the chickens. What followed was the most entertainment Loveth had experienced in 3 years. Sujin approached the chickens with the same intense focus he'd probably used in boardrooms. The chickens, sensing an amateur, mobbed him immediately. He stumbled backward, nearly dropping the bucket. They're attacking me, he said, genuinely alarmed. They're hungry. There's a difference. Loveth couldn't help laughing. Just scatter the feed and back away slowly. After the chickens came the goats. The one named Trouble immediately head-butted Sujin in the stomach. Loveth couldn't stop laughing as the feared Mafia Boss glared at a 40-pound goat. Your animals have no respect for authority, Sujin muttered. Animals don't care about boardrooms. They care about consistency and kindness. After the animals were tended, Loveth handed him a shovel. We need to clear the drainage ditches. It's about 200 yards of digging. Sujin looked at the shovel, then at the field. You're enjoying this. Immensely. But I'm also serious. This is the work. Every day. For 3 hours they work side by side. Sujin's technique was terrible at first, but he learned quickly. Loveth watched this man who commanded empires now sweating through a flannel shirt. His hands developing blisters he was too proud to mention. By noon they'd cleared half the ditches. Sujin was soaked through. His face flushed with exertion. At the well pump, he doused his head in cold water. You're smiling, Loveth observed. I am. He touched his face as if confirming. I can't remember the last time physical labor made me smile. They ate simple sandwiches at the kitchen table, both too tired for conversation. The silence between them was companionable, the shared exhaustion creating a fragile bridge. That evening they sat on the porch at sunset. Loveth looked at the fields they'd worked together. Why did you really come here? Not just the board crisis. What made you choose this path? Sujin was quiet for a long time. I was tired. So tired of the violence, the posturing, the constant vigilance. Every meal could be poisoned. Every handshake could hide a knife. I wanted to remember what it felt like to build something instead of just protecting it. Is it what you expected? No. was harder, more honest, more real. He looked at her. You're teaching me something I didn't know I needed to learn. The third morning brought unexpected violence. Loveth was collecting eggs when two black trucks rolled up the driveway. Her stomach dropped. Mr. Kang's collectors. 3 men climbed out, all wearing the swagger of people who enjoyed intimidation. The leader, a thick-necked man named Darius, smiled when he saw her. Morning, Loveth. You've been dodging our calls. I have 2 weeks until the next payment's due. Things have changed. Mr. Kong heard you had some visitors the other night. We're thinking maybe you came into some money. I don't have anything to share. That's disappointing. Mr. Kong was hoping we could settle this today. Otherwise, he's thinking this property might be worth more as ash and insurance claims. Darius pulled out a lighter and flicked it open. From the barn's shadow, Sujin emerged. He'd been mucking stalls, his clothes dirty. But the moment he stepped into the light, everything about him changed. His posture straightened. His expression emptied of everything except cold calculation. She said she doesn't have it, Sujin said quietly. I suggest you leave. Darius turned, sizing up the stranger. Who the hell are you? I'm her husband. And you're trespassing. Sujin moved between Loveth and the collectors. The debt she owes is now mine to manage. You'll deal with me going forward. Husband. Darius laughed. That's a new one. The debt will be settled. But not today and not with you. Tell Mr. Kong that Sujin Park has assumed responsibility. Something in the way Sujin said his name made Darius hesitate. Park. The park from Seoul. The same. The collectors exchanged glances. Whatever reputation Sujin carried had clearly reached even this rural corner. They backed toward their trucks, bravado deflated, and left in a spray of gravel. Loveth stood frozen. Sujin gently took the egg basket from her shaking hands. How often do they come? Every 2 weeks. Sometimes more if they're bored. They won't again. I'll make a call. By tonight, Mr. Kong will understand that your debt is no longer his concern. That afternoon they worked on fence repairs. Sujin moved with controlled aggression, taking out his residual anger on stubborn fence posts. That evening they sat on the porch as the sun set. Tell me about your scar, Loveth said, gesturing to his jaw. Negotiations that went poorly when I was 23. The other party thought physical intimidation would change my position. Did it? No. It made me more determined. He looked at her directly. That was the night I learned that showing weakness invites violence. I haven't shown weakness since. Until you came here, Loveth observed. Feeding chickens and digging ditches. That's pretty vulnerable. Is it? Sujin considered this. Or is it the strongest thing I've ever done? Admitting I needed something I couldn't buy or intimidate into existence. Sunday morning arrived clear and bright. Loveth woke early and went to town for supplies, leaving Sujin to his morning coffee. She returned to chaos. 2 more trucks had arrived. Mr. Kong himself stood on her porch, a thin man in an expensive coat who radiated casual cruelty. 4 guards surrounded him, all armed. Sujin stood at the bottom of the porch steps, positioned between Kong and the house. Ah, the wife, Kong said, smiling without warmth. Mr. Park and I were just discussing business. There's nothing to discuss, Sujin replied calmly. The debt is being handled through proper channels. I have every claim. The debt was mine long before you arrived. Kong descended 1 step. This isn't Seoul. This is my territory. Your reputation doesn't frighten me. Then you're either very brave or very stupid. Sujin's voice dropped to something deadly. I gave you a professional courtesy. I'm offering to settle the debt plus interest through legal means. I don't want your legal settlements. Kong gestured and his guards moved closer. Here's my counteroffer. You leave tonight and never return. Or we have a very different conversation. No, Sujin said simply. He pulled out his phone and tapped the screen once. 3 black SUVs materialized from the road, disgorging 8 men in tactical gear, all professionally armed. Kang's guards were suddenly drastically outmatched. "I hoped it wouldn't come to this," Sujin said. "But you've forced my hand." Sujin moved closer, close enough that his next words were only for Kang's ears, though Loveth heard them clearly. "The debt is now void. You will never contact this property again. You will never speak my wife's name. And if I hear that you've retaliated in any way, I will make you disappear so completely that your own mother won't remember you existed." Kong nodded once, sharp and desperate, and left with his men in a rush of engines and humiliation. Sujin approached Loveth slowly. "I'm sorry you had to see that. You threatened to kill him." "I did. Would you have? If it meant protecting you." Without hesitation. He looked at her directly. "Does that terrify you?" Loveth examined her feelings. Relief, gratitude, and yes, a thread of fear, but not of Sujin. "I'm not terrified. I'm grateful." They unpacked groceries in silence, the domestic normalcy surreal after the confrontation. Once everything was stored, they sat at the kitchen table. "I brought my world to your doorstep," Sujin said. "That's not what you signed up for." "I signed up for a year of marriage to a mafia boss. I'm not naive." Loveth wrapped her hands around her mug. "But I need to know, is this going to keep happening?" "Possibly. My enemies in Seoul are watching. If they see this as weakness, they might test it. Then teach me how to protect myself, how to see threats. I've spent 3 years being a victim. I'm done with that." Sujin studied her, something like pride flickering across his face. "All right. Tomorrow we start training." That week developed a rhythm. Mornings were for farm work, afternoons for Sujin's remote business operations. Sujin kept his promise about training, teaching her situational awareness, basic defensive moves. They worked together, ate together, gradually learned each other's rhythms and habits. The spare room upstairs remained his official space, but increasingly they spent evenings in the living room, reading or working in companionable silence. On the 8th day, everything changed. Sujin's phone rang during breakfast, the special tone that meant Seoul was calling with crisis-level news. He answered in Korean, his expression darkening. When he ended the call, his face was carved from ice. "There's been a coup. 3 board members attempted to seize control during my absence. They're claiming I've abandoned my responsibilities." "What does that mean?" "It means I have to go back today, face them down or lose everything. I'm coming with you." He turned, surprise breaking through the mask. "Loveth, this isn't. I'm your wife. If your being here is part of the problem, then having me there is part of the solution." She stood, matching his determination. "You think I'm letting you walk into a coup alone? It could be dangerous. So is staying here while they paint me as the weakness that ruined you. We're in this together now. I'm starting to like it more than I should." The admission seemed to surprise him. "All right, Backlight. We leave in an hour." The flight to Seoul was tense. Sujin worked constantly, making calls, reading reports, strategizing. Seoul exploded around them in neon and steel. They drove to a high-rise that pierced the sky like a glass sword. "This is headquarters," Sujin explained as they ascended. "The board meets on the executive floor. They're expecting me." "They're not expecting you." They entered a conference room where 12 people sat around an expensive table. All eyes turned to assess Loveth, who was clearly not what they expected. "Sujin." One of the men stood. "We weren't expecting you to bring a guest." "My wife, Loveth Park." Sujin pulled out a chair for her before taking his seat at the table's head. "Now, I understand there's been some concern about my leadership. Let's address that directly." What followed was 3 hours of corporate warfare. The coup leaders presented evidence of Sujin's abandonment, missed meetings, delayed decisions, the scandal of his marriage and rural retreat. Sujin dismantled their arguments with patient precision. He showed how every critical decision had been made on time, presented growth numbers that outpaced the previous quarter, revealed that 2 of the coup leaders had been embezzling funds. But the killing blow came from Loveth. One of the board members had been particularly vicious, suggesting that Sujin's marriage was a sign of weakness. Loveth stood. "May I respond to that?" Sujin nodded, trust evident in his expression. "You're right that our marriage was sudden. And yes, it was initiated because Sujin needed stability." Loveth met the woman's gaze directly. "But what you're calling weakness I call strategy. You wanted a leader who understood family values, tradition, commitment." Sujin demonstrated all 3 in a single action. More importantly, he's proven he can operate at full effectiveness from anywhere. That's not weakness. That's adaptability. He paused. "As for my role, I'm not some trophy wife acquired for show. I'm a businesswoman who's kept a failing operation afloat for 3 years through sheer determination. Sujin chose me because he recognized a kindred spirit. So yes, your leader spent 2 weeks working a farm learning humility. And in that time, he uncovered embezzlement, maintained operational excellence, and secured a marriage that satisfies your stated requirements. If that's your definition of weak leadership, I'd hate to see what you consider strong." She sat down. The silence was absolute. Then one director began to clap. Others joined. The vote was called. Sujin retained his position 11-1. Afterwards, in Sujin's private office, Loveth collapsed into a chair. "That was incredible," Sujin said. "Where did that come from?" 3 years of being looked down on by diner customers who thought waitresses were beneath them. I know how to defend against condescension. You didn't just defend. You dominated." He sat on the desk's edge, looking at her with undisguised admiration. "Thank you." His phone exploded with alerts. He checked the screen and went pale. "What is it?" "The 2 embezzlers I exposed. They've hired a team to go after the farm. They know I care about you." Loveth's heart dropped. "How long do we have?" "They left an hour ago." Sujin was already making calls, barking orders. "We can't get there in time. But I have people in the region." They raced back to the airport, Sujin coordinating a response. The plane couldn't fly fast enough. They landed with 30 minutes to spare. As they turned onto the property road, smoke was already visible. 3 vehicles were parked in the driveway. The barn was aflame, the house's windows shattered. Sujin's driver barely stopped before Sujin was out, weapon drawn, Loveth right behind him. 4 attackers were systematically destroying the property. Sujin moved with lethal precision, dropping 1 guard before the man could react. The second guard returned fire. Loveth dove behind the truck, crawling toward the house's side entrance while Sujin provided covering fire. She reached the kitchen door and slipped inside. The attacker in the living room was destroying photo albums, her mother's china, every irreplaceable piece of family history. Loveth grabbed the shotgun from the hall closet and stepped into the living room. "Stop!" The man turned and reached for his weapon. Loveth fired first. The blast took him in the shoulder, spinning him into the wall. Outside, more gunfire erupted. Sujin's security team had arrived, engaging the remaining attackers. Loveth secured the wounded man and moved through the house. She found Sujin on the front porch, bleeding from a graze wound on his arm. "You're shot," she said, already moving to assess the damage. "It's superficial." He caught her hands, pulling her close. "You're alive. That's what matters." Around them, the security team finished securing the property. The barn was a loss, flames consuming decades of history. But the house had survived. The aftermath was chaos. Police reports, insurance claims, security installations. The embezzlers were arrested, facing charges that would ensure they never saw freedom again. Took 3 days to clean up. On the 4th day, as they surveyed the damage, Sujin made a decision. "I'm stepping down," he said quietly. Loveth turned to him, shocked. "What?" "From the sole position. I'm keeping my shares, my financial stake. But someone else can run the daily operations. He looked at the scorched earth. I've spent 15 years building an empire. I want to spend the next 15 building something different. You're sure? That was my legacy. This. He gestured at the estate at her. This is what I choose. If you'll have me. Not as a contract but as a real partner. Real marriage. The year isn't up. I don't want to wait for the year to end. I want to start building something that lasts longer than any contract. Sujin took her hands. I love you, Loveth. Somewhere between chicken feeding and boardroom coups, I fell completely in love with my wife. I love you too. The admission felt like freedom. I think I have since you stood between me and Kang's men. He kissed her then, gentle and thorough, a promise sealed in action. Around them, the estate stretched toward evening, broken but not defeated. The transition took 2 months. Sujin transferred daily control to a trusted director. The farm transformed under their combined efforts. New barn, repaired house, modern equipment. They hired help from town. 6 months after that midnight arrival, they stood on the porch at sunset, watching the fields they'd planted together. Any regrets? She asked. Not even one. He kissed the top of her head. You. I regret we didn't get to elope properly. The courthouse wedding was pretty anticlimactic. We could renew our vows. Do it right this time. Loveth smiled. I'd like that. Speaking of which, Sujin pulled an envelope from his pocket. The divorce papers came today. Our year is officially up. Loveth took the envelope, feeling its weight. Inside were the documents that would legally end their contract marriage. She looked at Sujin, at this man who'd transformed from desperate mafia boss to genuine partner. Burn them, she said. He walked to the fire pit and the papers caught quickly, transforming from legal document to ash. When he returned, his smile was the freest thing she'd ever seen. Now what? He asked. Now we build. Loveth took his hand. Not an empire. Just a life. A real one. They stood together as darkness fell. Two people who'd signed a contract and found something infinitely more valuable. The house behind them glowed with warm light. The fields stretched toward a horizon full of possibilities. Somewhere in Seoul, another ambitious person was probably climbing toward power and exhaustion. But here, in this countryside refuge, a former mafia boss and a former waitress had learned that the hardest thing to build wasn't an empire, it was a home. And they'd built it together, from broken boards and broken lives and a midnight bargain that had turned into forever.